Good evening. I'm Beth Dobkin, Westminster College President, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this evening's debates. It's wonderful to see the partnership between Westminster College and our local community councils, and to bring so many neighbors to our campus. It's wonderful to have you here. In case you're not terribly familiar with what we do at Westminster College, social responsibility, civic engagement are at the core of what we do. And it's part of what lets us be the kind of sponsor for this event. But I want to particularly recognize our college's Dumke Center for Civic Engagement, because that's really the hub where we teach our students about political activism, engagement, registering voters, providing the kind of information that helps citizens make informed decisions about their futures. And really, that's why we're here, is to be able to gain that kind of information that contributes to high-quality political discourse and engages us in ways that we can make the best possible decisions for our future. So thank you for being here and joining us in this critical work. I'd like to welcome Jason.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Jason Stevenson. I'm the co-chair of the East Liberty Park Community Organization, one of the 7 community councils that helped put on this debate tonight. This all started a couple months ago with an idea of, hey, what could we do to prepare for the upcoming mayoral contest? Back then, we didn't realize that this was going to be debate number 716 for you guys. We thought it was fresh and original, but hey, more civic engagement, the better, right? And I just want to talk a bit about the community councils that are behind this debate, because really community councils are the most basic, the closest to you level of political and civic engagement in our city. Every single resident of Salt Lake City is represented by a community council. They have cool names like Poplar Grove and Ballpark and Sugar House and ELPCO, which is the one I represent. They sponsor events like the 9th and 9th Street Festival and Groove in the Grove, the Wasatch Hollow Fest. These are events that you probably know about, but maybe don't know that there's a community council running it, organizing it, putting it together every year. They also are great forums when those controversies arise in our neighborhoods. When there's something that needs to be hashed out, in our neighborhood it happens to be parking, in other neighborhoods it's other things. The community council is the forum where people can come together and have a voice, an equal voice. Everyone gets heard. We make sure that the community is represented. So if this is your first event that you've come to that's represented or run by a community council, I encourage you to check out the council in your area. You can look it up on the city website, start attending the monthly meetings, get involved, and it's a nice way that you can just get started, and someday you might even end up on this stage, because many people on this stage started off working on community councils. Thank you again for coming tonight. Thank you to our candidates for taking time to do this. And I'd now like to introduce the moderator for tonight's debate, Marley Dominguez, a student here at Westminster College.
Good evening. My name is Marley Dominguez, and I am a third-year student studying Justice and Gender Studies at Westminster College. I am also the Political Engagement Coordinator at Westminster's Dumke Center for Civic Engagement. I will be your moderator for tonight's debate, and I look forward to facilitating a discussion with 7 of the 8 candidates running for Salt Lake City Mayor on issues pertinent to our communities. Before I let the candidates introduce themselves, I would like to take the opportunity to explain the format and rules of tonight's debate. Tonight's debate will be organized into 3 parts. In a moment, I will invite each candidate to briefly introduce themselves in 1 minute or less. Following that, we will engage in a moderated discussion during which each candidate will have the opportunity to answer each question in 90 seconds or less. Each candidate will also have the ability to offer up 2 60-second rebuttals at their discretion. Throughout the debate, I will track the approximate amount of speaking time utilized by each candidate and make every reasonable effort to ensure an equitable distribution of time. The questions that the candidates will be discussing during this portion of the debate all came from community members represented by their local community councils, and none of the candidates have had the opportunity to preview any of these questions. Finally, each candidate will have 2 minutes to offer closing remarks. The order has been predetermined by drawing numbers from a hat, and the order will be reversed for the closing statements. There will also be a timekeeper sitting in front of the auditorium with a 30-second warning, 15-second warning, and time's up indicator. Before the debate begins, I'd like you to please silence your cell phones, be respectful of the candidates on stage, and please refrain from applauding until the very end of the debate. I would now like to welcome the candidates. You may join me in applause once all their names have been read. Richard Goldberger, Luz Escamilla, Stan Penfold, David Garbett, Jim Dobkin, David Ibarra, and Aaron Mendenhall. So we will now begin with the introductions, starting with Richard Goldberger.
Thank you. I'm privileged to be here. My name is Richard N. Goldberger. I see myself as a common sense-crat. I'm not a politician. I see myself also as a servant to the people, strictly a public servant. My slogan is GBO, Government by Objectives. One of the first things I want to do is to establish an emergency for the homeless, our domestic refugees in Salt Lake. I want to bring the office of the mayor into the neighborhoods in Salt Lake with a large bus, and I will be spending most of my time in the neighborhoods. I have a very doable vision of how to make the city really great. It used to be called great in the 1850s, though nothing with Donald Trump. It was called Great Salt Lake City. I want to make the city great again. Thank you for your courtesy.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here on this part of the city. It's a beautiful part. If you live close, you probably do enjoy a great quality of life. I live in Rose Park in the west side of Salt Lake City, but we do enjoy a lot of the east side parts of the city as a family. I want to tell you why it's so important that we're having this conversation today, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you. I want to listen to you. And I've been working for Salt Lake City for the last 11 years as a state legislator in very red state legislature, as you all probably know, but I've succeeded in passing 50 bills. I'm here to tell you that we need a champion, and I'm committed to be that champion moving forward. I know that what it takes to make sure that we're defending our values, and I will do that as your next mayor. Thank you.
My name is Stan Penfold. It's great to be here this evening. Just over 30 years ago, I moved into a new neighborhood in Salt Lake City and almost immediately became concerned about an issue in my neighborhood that was speeding and traffic, something very familiar to a lot of communities in Salt Lake City. I didn't know what to do, so I talked to a few neighbors and got organized and quickly found out about my community council, where I met with them and got engaged, and they provided some incredible support. And since I was new and didn't know any better, they made me the chair. I had an incredible experience, and I eventually became the chair of the Salt Lake Association of Community Councils and served for 2 terms on the Salt Lake City Council. It was an incredible experience, and my concern is that I want to represent you as a mayor moving Salt Lake City forward.
You know, we've done a lot of debates, and I've been waiting for that one that was close enough that I could walk from my house, and today is the day for me. I live just a block from campus. It's great to be here in my neighborhood, great to be here with you. I've been working to try and improve my community for all of my career. I worked as an attorney with the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance for 10 years on protecting public lands, litigating environmental issues, and also trying to protect air quality. I spent 1.5 years as the executive director of a neighborhood group in the downtown Pioneer Park area working on homelessness. But the reason I'm here today really is about my daughters and the fact that I'm tired of living in a community where I'm exposing them to lifelong health effects. And it was just this past December over at the urgent care on 9th East that my wife took our daughter during a bad inversion, sent me a photo of my daughter with a breathing mask connected to a machine because doctors were worried she had damaged her lungs. And that's why I'm here today, to do something about air quality.
Hi, my name is Jim DeBackus. I had the honor and privilege really to represent you in the Senate. We've got 2 hours, so I want to tell you what happened on the way over here in 48 seconds because it's a blur. So I lost my Chihuahua, our family Chihuahua, a couple of weeks ago, and waited a week and went down to the pound and got Paco and Taco, these brother Chihuahuas. And one of them escaped 5 days ago, and it's just been tearing my heart out. So I'm coming down 9th East, and there is the black Chihuahua that's my Chihuahua that I've been looking everywhere for. So I jerked over, left the car running, and through those alleys, I'm chasing this dog, and it's darting back and forth because it knows I'm chasing him, and it gets to a lady's lawn, and it starts pooping, and I see it's not my dog, and the lady says, "Get that damn dog of yours off of my..." I gotta go, I'm out of time.
Wow. I don't... you kill me. I'm David Ibarra, and I'm running for mayor because I love problem solving. I want to do the job of mayor and not just be the mayor. I started off my first quarter. I was born in Salt Lake and raised by Salt Lake. I was raised in Utah foster care system for the first 14 years of my life, and I gained something from that experience, and that was a passion for inclusion, compassion, and fairness for everybody. My second quarter, I started as a dishwasher trying to figure out how am I going to make a living, and I worked my way up at Marriott's restaurants to 10 years later becoming the director of training for the Western United States and buying my own and coming back to Salt Lake City. Now I'm in the third quarter, and I've started several companies housed here in Salt Lake City. And I want to do the fourth quarter is serve the city in sharing what I've learned as a leader doing coaching performance for over 300 companies and CEOs all over this country.
Good evening. I'm Erin Mendenhall. There's so many friendly faces in the audience. I am running for mayor because I think it's time Salt Lake City elects a mayor that knows how to run city government, that isn't necessarily a legislator from the Hill, but who's been doing the work with you week in and week out, day in and day out. I'm grateful for all the community councils that put this together tonight, and I'm really grateful for the 6.5 years I've been spending with you in your community councils, with you at City Hall. I'm a two-term councilwoman. I'm in my 6th year on the City Council. I'm the chair of our State Air Quality Board. I co-founded Breathe Utah, an air quality nonprofit that's been working on environmental education from an air quality perspective and policy for the last 10 years. I'm here because I know how to make city government work for you. I've been through the high times and the low times with you, and I'm ready to work for you as your mayor and get us farther as a city. We need to stop relying on the state and the way things happen at the state and get things done right here in our neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you. We will now commence with the second part of the debate and engage in a moderated discussion. As a reminder, you have up to 90 seconds to respond, and you may raise your hand if you would like to use one of your 2 rebuttals. Luz Escamilla, you will be speaking first, so please keep that in mind as I read the next question. The first question comes from the Ballpark Community Council. Recognizing that there was some initial resistance from residents where the homeless resource centers are now being built, how will your administration assist these neighborhoods to ensure the transition is smooth for everyone and that residents' concerns are addressed?
So the issue of homelessness also has to do with very generous communities that have been dealing with this issue, and that's the entire Salt Lake City. So as a member of the Rose Park community, I understand because we've seen since the Rio Grande operation, spread of that homelessness, individuals encountering homelessness moving everywhere. So to answer the question, We need to make sure that the communities feel that they have a place to get the answers of issues and they can actually report activity that they feel put into danger their communities. So I'm committed to having a more open dialogue with those communities. The community councils is the first place to go. Part of what we're promoting with our vision for Salt Lake City is to have navigators within Salt Lake City. It's not friendly to go to City Hall, and I'm trying to put City Hall in neighborhoods, taking those meetings and having interpreters when needed, having childcare assistance, so we can have more conversations. I want to listen to what Ballpark community will be facing in order to respond and address their concerns. The smaller resource centers, I believe, are better when making sure that those individuals can be reintegrated to communities. And that's why moving away from the one large piece to more resource centers with smaller communities living there is better. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penfold, you are next.
I think the community should expect two things from the city. The smaller resource centers are a better design, and I think the city tried really hard to listen to the community to reduce the impact of a large center in any one neighborhood. However, they're new, and we don't know quite how they're going to work. We think we know how they're going to work. And I think one of the responsibilities of the city and one of the expectations from the neighborhood should be monitoring activity around those, all of those centers. The city should be doing that without relying on the neighborhood or the expectation of the neighborhood to follow that themselves and then report back to the city. So I think it's really important that this process moving forward sets up a monitoring system so we can see what additional impacts may or may not happen in those particular neighborhoods. The city then has to be really flexible about how they adjust management of those centers in collaboration with the nonprofits that will be running those to ensure that they minimize any impact in the neighborhood going forward. We do have some concerns. I have some concerns. We're going to a reduced number of beds. We will have fewer beds than we have currently with the road home. And I think this winter is going to be an interesting experience for all of us. And I think as a community, we need to work really hard to ensure that we don't end up with people sleeping out in the cold this winter on the street.
Thank you. Mr. Garbett, you are next.
So coming from a neighborhood working with the Pioneer Park Coalition where we struggled with this very issue, effects in a neighborhood that had grown from activities at the shelter, I understand that this is critical and it's important. We actually made specific recommendations to the organization that will be in charge of this new homeless resource center in the Ballpark Community Council area, Shelter the Homeless. And we asked that they do two different things. One, collect subjective data. And to do that they form a specific committee of people that would meet with frequency to give them feedback on what was happening in the neighborhood. Another was to go out and survey neighbors in the area. Second, on objective data to collect information on crime, also collect information on demographics, so who was sleeping or staying in the neighborhood, again with specific frequency. I am optimistic about this new system. We're going from a shelter that on average has 700 people a night in it. In the winter can peak up above 900 to one that has 200. So I do think that there's reason for optimism, but it is about that constant engagement, ensuring that we're reaching out to the community, listening to those concerns, and acting quickly. We have to be willing to act quickly and nip problems in the bud.
Thank you. Mr. Dobkin, you are next.
Thank you. Having gone to the Northwest, up to Seattle recently, relatively recently, it dawned on me that there's a wonderful, grand American city that has lost control of this issue and of the people whose lives are affected by it. There's homeless people everywhere. They're defecating on the streets. They live under every underpass. You have to go around them on the sidewalks. And the city of Seattle, it seems to me, has joined a number of West Coast major cities that have just given up, that have said, no, we can't help these people. We're just going to let it go. And I'm very proud of some things, and I'm very concerned about some others in the way Utah's handled it. We have taken our whole community, the state, with the governor, with the lieutenant governor, we have the highway patrol, we have so many people, the mayor of the county and the city, our philanthropic people, our nonprofits have sat down and we've come up with a plan. We don't know if it's going to work or not yet, but we haven't given up. We're there, we're in the battle. Who's going to represent the neighborhoods though? That needs to be at this table. It has to be the mayor who stands up and has that communication with the neighborhoods and gets it to that big table where that $100 million is being spent. I'll be that liaison.
Thank you. Mr. Ibarra, you're next.
Thank you. As we look at the resource centers that aren't scheduled to open up, who knows when, but it'll be sometime this year, there's delays. I think that it's important in anything that we do is that we had an initial plan. The plan has spent $100 million in creating 3 resource centers, 2 in Salt Lake City, and 1 in 3300 South and 10th West. We have got to have the patience to let them open, see what happens in the reduction of folks sleeping on the street. Now, with that said, I live on 2nd South and 3rd East, and I walk this Salt Lake City every night for 45 minutes to wind down. Our city has changed. Since the Rio Grande, the problem has spread throughout the city. It is no longer safe to walk at night in my neighborhood. And what we have to do, and do it quickly, and not just create data, we have to have protection. We've got to go to walking street police officers that know the neighbors, know the businesses, and know the folks that are in trouble. We've got to be compassionate. We have to be ready to act should the resource centers not work. And my time is up.
Thank you. Ms. Mendenhall, you are next.
Thank you. This is a great question, I think, that illustrates why I'm on the stage tonight, why I'm running for mayor, which is because I don't have to hypothesize about what I would do to work with the neighborhoods to address these coming homeless resource centers. I've been working with these neighborhoods. I've been working with community council chairs Bill Davis and now Amy Hawkins, Sarah Adelman, Jeff Baer before that at Liberty Wells. And I have their endorsement as a candidate for mayor. I have the endorsement of our first responders who are with us tonight, Salt Lake City firefighters, because they know that I show up and I stay at the conversation with you, and then I work my butt off to get what we need to make sure our communities are in the best shape possible. And we need to answer this question from 2 sides. There's the question of the existing residents today who are about to become host communities to our 2 new homeless resource centers. And there's also the question of the residents who are the homeless resource clients who are yet to arrive really as clients in those neighborhoods with the resource centers. We have been working from an infrastructure perspective. I have made sure that 3rd West has the improvements it needs so that people accessing the shelter can actually get there, where we didn't have curb cuts for them to get there on the sidewalks before on 3rd West. We've been working on street lighting for the area, and we have a rebuild of 3rd West coming. I made sure that the Community Advisory Board was built into these processes so you have a permanent voice that demands feedback from the operators of the homeless resource centers. And my time is up, but I could go on.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberger, you are next.
Thank you. As mayor, day 1, I would declare an emergency, a citywide emergency. First, I refer to the homeless as American refugees. I do not like the term homeless. I do not like the term shelter. I would set up 2 things together in concert, a very nice triage campus, and I would also have established massive outreach with a hotline. I will not allow as mayor anyone to feel they have the license to do whatever they want, to camp and do whatever they want on the streets. That is not acceptable. I will also establish at the library immediately a triage assistance setup, desks, so people can come in and get assistance immediately. I would have that done. This is really important. The library is an informatics center, and this would be the perfect location. We had this 2.5 years ago for one day. I would have this every day, 7 days a week. I want these folks to get the help they need. This is very, very important. Again, we're not talking, as the public perceives the homeless to be human garbage. We're talking human beings. These are folks who have tremendous problems, and we need to identify these problems and try to stabilize their life. This is really, really important. We have a nationwide problem. Los Angeles is 59,000 people. We have about 7,000 in Salt Lake right now. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. For the next question, Mr. Penfold, you will speak first. Please keep that in mind as I read the question. This next question comes from the Central City Neighborhood Council. Salt Lake City has a long history of an economic, social, and political divide between the East and the West. What policies would you promote to help the city's divide?
Thank you. There are two primary concerns I have about the perception that we have an East Side and the reality that we have an East-West divide. There is clearly a lack of infrastructure investment on the West Side, and that has been something the city has struggled with for many, many years. If you look at services on the West Side, most residents there have to actually leave their neighborhood to get the basic services we consider neighborhood type services. A cup of coffee, sometimes groceries, just lunch at a restaurant. There are food deserts on the West Side where people truly don't have any food resources within walking distance of their home. So there are two proposals that I feel are really important for the entire city, particularly Central City and West Side. Nobody should be more than 5 minutes from a walking distance from a service in the neighborhood or a transit hub that gets you to a service in the neighborhood. And that's a priority, I think, when we're looking at transportation access across the city, is that we ought to have centralized hubs where people can access services quickly. The other thing is an investment in the West Side in regards to how people move back and forth to services throughout the city. A primary example is the Folsom Trail, which connects downtown corridor to the Jordan River and has been funded and not built for about 5 years.
Time. Thank you. Mr. Garbett, you are next.
I think many of the biggest problems we face in the city that hold back economic development are common problems throughout the city. Number one is air quality, inadequate transportation options, subpar roads. These are issues that we need to address throughout the city. But as for specific neighborhoods and how we can help them to address some of their challenges, again, when I was with the Pioneer Park Coalition, I had firsthand experience with where the city was coming up short on this front. There I worked with the Downtown Community Council. We felt like one of the big projects that neighborhood needed to help create more cohesion and to bring people to the area was an improved Pioneer Park. So working with the chair of Downtown Community Council, we put together a proposal. We actually rounded up some funding for some improvements, but we got the cold shoulder from the mayor's office. And I thought that was really disappointing because we knew that our idea could succeed. It was an idea that we had borrowed from other cities. We have many exciting opportunities throughout the city in different neighborhoods. We have an opportunity for a Warm Springs Park. I've been on the West Side and heard in Poplar Grove, for example, they want that coffee shop that Stan talked about. These sorts of improvements, listening to the community councils, I think are how we can drive that economic development on the local scale.
Thank you. Mr. Dobkin, you are next.
You know, we've been doing a lot of debates, and in a lot of ways we have the same ideas. I think when it comes down to selecting a mayor, it's the questions that aren't on the table, that were not asked, the ones that are going to break, or the ones that, the new issues that come up. And for that, I suggest, not just for me, but for all of us, look at our approach, look at the way we view the world. My education, I mean, I grew up I didn't grow up. The first place I lived in the city was Rose Park. I've been in most of the districts that have been mentioned. I've lived there one time or another. But after I got into the Senate and I was put on the Education Committee, my first stop was to Rose Park Elementary School, where for a whole school year, I spent Thursday afternoon an hour with the kindergartners and an hour with the fifth graders. That experience, to watch those children, to watch some of them, the teachers reported, who were hungry. How does a second grader or a kindergarten child learn anything when they're hungry at 11 o'clock? That's the passion that I would bring to bringing equality to all the parts of our city.
Thank you. Mr. Ibarra, you are next.
This west side, east side, or in Sacramento, south side, north side, it's been a lifelong division forever. I remember growing up and complaining to my father about opportunity, and he sat me down and told me, get over it. It's the way life is. You got to work twice as hard to have half as much. That's not the answer. That is not the answer. An education on the west side should be the same as it on the east side. If you take a look at just something as simple as the number of trees that are owned in this city, there's 87,000 trees. You start on the east side and see how the trees look and drive to the west side. And on the west side, guess what? There's not as many trees. We have room for 20,000 more. Beautiful, prosperous, and livable for all sides of our city. And the one thing that we need to do is have a different master plan that includes the west side. We have 9th and 9th, 9th and Central. Why not 8th and 8th on the west side? We can do better. We have to do better. And when we invest money in this city, as mayor, I will have it plotted on the internet, on our site, where is the money being spent, so that we're judged as elected officials, and it must be fair. It hasn't been fair, but it will be in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Mendenhall, you are next.
Part of the struggle of actually working in City Hall is, and being a policymaker, is that I actually want to answer your question, which is how will I address policy, through policy, an east-west, west-east divide in Salt Lake City. So there's a number of policies, and I'll rattle some of them off. And if any of you want to go deeper with me in this conversation, I'd be happy to talk with you after, because we can only touch the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, in 90 seconds. We need to talk about food equity policies and food security policies for kids and families. We know where the SNAP, the food benefits programs in our schools are concentrated, and it's on the west side. We know we have a food desert, economically speaking, on the west side. We need to talk about geographic equity, and that's something that I've been working on as a city councilwoman and RDA board member for years. And when I worked on the affordable housing $21 million that I put together for the RDA a couple of years ago, I made sure to set aside $4.5 million of that for areas of high opportunity, because we need to stop concentrating our investments on the west side of Salt Lake City for affordable housing and make affordable housing accessible across the city. That's something I'm working passionately on. Transit opportunities, and that's something that the council took on with intention to create geographic equity as we build out our bus service that's hitting the roads in August, to make sure that this wasn't just about where's ridership the highest, but are we geographically representing the needs across the city. Transportation investments, job opportunity investments, apprenticeships that we invest in other companies in.
I'm sorry, but that's time. Thank you. Mr. Goldberger,
Objective
you're next.
number one, I will have the Mayor Mobile, a giant bus, visit the different neighborhoods in all parts of the city, but especially the west side. I want to listen to the people. What do you want? What are your wish lists? Tell me in the immediate, short term, intermediate term, and long term. What do you want? What do you want the city to do? How can you make the city great? Tell me. I don't have all the answers. I think I have a few, but I want to know what you folks have. And also, objective number two, I want to establish the UXX, the Utah Export Expo, a permanent Utah product trade show. There's no reason in the world the governor has to go out and spend hundreds of thousands with his cronies to try to sell Utah in, let's say, China or Japan or Europe. The world comes to Utah 24/7, and I want to sell Utah here. And this is fantastic. No other state does this. They do this in other countries, a permanent Utah product trade show. This is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's a win-win for economic development, and I locate this in the port area in the northwest corridor, close to the proximity of the airport. I believe in win-win, and as I say, my slogan is government by objectives. It's a movement based on common sense. We need common sense because without common sense, you have nonsense, and nonsense in government does not work.
Thank you. Ms. Escamilla, you are next.
Thank you. And I apologize for coughing. My asthma is kicking in. I don't know if it's the building. I apologize. Or the ozone. It could be any. So this issue of disparity and lack of equity and justice, I think it depends on the zip code where you live. And I don't know that it's just necessarily east versus west. It has to do with socioeconomic access, has to do with race and ethnicity, has to do with many other factors. We have a school here on the east side of Salt Lake, Benyon Elementary, that is facing now a closure. This is what I'm going to get to. The lack of leadership on addressing issues of equity is real in the city. I encourage you to check on people's records, on closing, so having real deliverable results on closing those issues. Because it's happening, and if you have a specific zip code, it actually determines your achievement gap, the type of jobs you'll get, the type of access to programs and services. Not all of them are the city fault, but you do need a leader that can stand up to the state legislature and fight for those values. And what have people done is what I think it's important, because it's really easy to say a lot of things and promise, but then it's what have you actually done? And we do need someone to stand up on education, like you do in issues of transit and accessibility and affordability, because it's for a single mom, it will be very difficult to take transit when they have to drop their kids in 2 different daycares and they're trying to get 2 different jobs in a day. So those are issues that I think are valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. For the next question, Mr. Garbett, you will speak first. Please keep that in mind as I read the question. The following question comes from the Downtown Community Council. Acknowledging that we've created a bit of a vacuum with Operation Rio Grande, what is your vision for Pioneer Park and the surrounding neighborhood now that the road home is closing? So, Mr. Garbett.
So 2 things. One, my vision for Pioneer Park. I've already put this together. It's a public-private partnership that builds on how other cities have addressed their very own version of Pioneer Park. You know, this problem that we face at Pioneer Park, which is that it's not an effective public space, because most people in this auditorium would not feel comfortable going to that park at any hour of the day. And if that's the case, then it's not a public space. We know that it is during times like the farmers market. Other cities have addressed this by doing things like bringing food in. So the Pioneer Park Coalition, we were working with the IRC to try and bring a spice kitchen concept to the park. Hosting more events, exactly like the farmers market, but with greater variety throughout the week. Part of what we did was contribute money so that there could be a sports field in the park and adult leagues could play there throughout the evening from spring through fall. For the area that would be vacated by the road home, my ideal vision for that area would be a state history museum. I think that that's a great location, accessible to so many people of the city. It's also a place that school kids are coming all the time because of Discovery Gateway and the planetarium. That's what I'd love to see in that spot.
Thank you. Mr. Dobkin, you are next.
I'm certainly open, and I've met with the Pioneer Park Coalition. The city is $30 million behind on repairs and on what we need to do with the parks. And if there is a way that we can sit down with, I hate to call it privatizing the parks, but as we sit down, there is some possibility to discuss there what could be done. But I think the vision ought to be broader. Ultimately, both in that neighborhood and as you move further west and across all the city, the unifying thing that everybody in Salt Lake City needs is better paying jobs, an opportunity for advancement in jobs, an opportunity to not have to work 3 jobs in order to pay for a living. So as we begin to look at the possibilities of the vacated place and the possibility of attracting there the kind of jobs that we need where people can actually afford to have a house, we need to not lose track of all, as we talk about all these problems, about the dignity of attracting to our city the right kind of jobs and not just these $10 and $12 an hour jobs that so many high five when they're attracted to our community. We need good paying jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Ibarra, you are next.
The question is about Pioneer Park and the surrounding area. And it's interesting, as I look at what motivated me to get into this, run for mayor, we've been talking about the same things for 20 years. Last debates, same thing. The ones before that, same thing. Politics and policy. Politics and policy. Stir the soup and try to convince you that you're at a barbecue. It doesn't work. The Pioneer Park, I just called up a city that fixed it, had the same problem as us. Other cities all across America are problem solving too. We need to take best practices. Houston, Texas, had their 12-acre Pioneer Park in the center of their city. And they got some foundations together, and 10 years later, they've got Discovery Green Park. Google it, Discovery Green Park. It is the most beautiful center of the city, and it used to be an eyesore. Today, all the property around it is the most valuable property because this is the success of Houston. 600 events going on at Discovery Park. Mayor Turner and the director of the park spent the day with me. We can do projects like that. There's no reason we can't. We got to get started and stop talking.
Thank you. Ms. Mendenhall, you are next.
You know, we have a growing population. You know this, and you know that we're going to double our regional population in the coming couple of decades. And most of that's our kids, really. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, which I could make a guess about most of us in this room, but when we look at the broad conversation of who's moving into this city, a lot of it's our kids. Most of it's our kids, and we want them to be able to put their roots down and grow and innovate businesses here and be able to breathe clean air and raise their kids here. And the reality is that our proportion of people to parks right now is not so good in the downtown area. We know we need a good downtown park, and Pioneer Park can be that. But I believe, as some other candidates do, that this is an opportunity for a public-private partnership. As your next mayor, I'm going to be investing in our streets and our infrastructure. I'm going to be investing in expediting getting buses into our neighborhoods where we go. Our first buses are hitting the ground next month. And it is an opportunity for us to look at a public-private partnership, as many of the parks probably going to be mentioned here tonight around the country have done, which is to say that Salt Lake City doesn't shoulder the entire burden for the programming, the events, and what's in that park. That's something that I've explored with the Downtown Alliance over the years and with the Pioneer Park Coalition, and Pioneer Park is our very best opportunity for us to make an incredible downtown park like we've never had in Salt Lake City and get more out of it as residents.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberger, you are next.
Thank you. Let's be very specific. Objective 1, I would establish a permanent police precinct within Pioneer Park. Number 2, I would, in conjunction with the Department of Workforce Services, I would hold a curb employment market where the people who want jobs would hold up nice signs, carpenter, 5 years of experience, etc. And this would be under the auspices of the Department of Workforce Services, so the spot labor people would not get taken advantage of. Number 3, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Saturday is usually in the nice months of the year. The farmers market. I'd hold a people's market. I'd have food, I'd have junk, and I'd have fun. I think that would be very nice. And I'd also would like to see, I'd like to call Salt Lake City the city of festivals. I'd like to have a blues festival, the jazz festival again in the park, a Gershwin festival, and a Copeland festival. I want to make this park shine. I want to do it right. I want to make the city again great. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Escamilla, we'll hear from you next.
Thank you. So I think this is a no-brainer to have a private-public partnership. Taxpayers cannot continue to put this level of infrastructure, but we do need someone leading that. And there are already groups working with a vision that makes sense, that's inclusive, that integrates what the Pioneer Park community wants. And I think that's encouraging. So moving forward, Sugar House has done this. It's not unheard of. So I'm committed to making sure that place becomes a green space for people to access, for children to be able to play, but also to bring some of the, the quality of life that we all want into that park and reflect to have, our downtown park in that area and be, recognize that there is still going to be some influx there of individuals that will be experiencing homelessness, because those are not going to go immediately. And if someone promises that, it's like they're lying. So we just need to recognize that that's still going to be part in that area, and some of the resources, because we're going to have Catholic Community Services there, a block away from there. So what do we do to even have spaces within that park that will accommodate that? And I think the vision that is being proposed with the groups in that area makes sense, and I'm excited to, as the new mayor, the next mayor, just lead in that vision and making sure we have the private funding, adequate private investment to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penfold, you're next.
Activity and people make a park safe and successful. And the city has an opportunity, I think, around Pioneer Park in particular, to really help that neighborhood program activities and a variety of activities in that park. The farmers market's an exceptional example. If you go down there on a Saturday morning, it does not feel unsafe. And it's quite the meeting place. I think people spend more time talking to their friends and neighbors than they do shopping for produce. And that's the kind of atmosphere and activity that we need to encourage in that park to continue that feeling throughout the week. There's a great opportunity around the park for additional housing, and that's the people element. There's a considerable amount of warehouse district still within a block or two of the Pioneer Park area. And I think it's a great opportunity for the city to really focus on starting to provide that diversity of housing that we all talk about that we need in the city. What an excellent place to put that, where we already have a park that's accessible to people and needs the investment of people using the facility.
Thank you. For the next question, Mr. Dobkin, you will speak first. Please keep that in mind as I read the next question. The next question comes from East Liberty Park Community Organization. Using the 9th and 9th neighborhood as an example, how do you encourage neighborhood growth and rebirth without compromising scale and character?
My first house was on the corner of Lake Street and 9th South, and if I only would have kept it. I mean, in a way, those of us who have a house, this is all great news, with the values having gone where they've gone. But the dilemma that it creates for our children, the dilemma that it creates for the gentrification of our neighborhoods, particularly in 9th and 9th, but really all over the city, that is a terrific issue. And it's not easy to solve that. And anybody who says, I got a 10-second solution to that, and I got a program for that, they probably haven't done their homework. It's going to take all of the above on a lot of approaches to make sure that our neighborhoods are conducive to making sure that we continue to be open to a wide variety of people over the next generation. How we'll do that, I'll explain the next time I get the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Ibarra, you are next.
He wanted to give me his extra 10 seconds. One, I tell you, the 9th and 9th, 9th and Central, and those neighborhoods are the heart and soul of Salt Lake City. And how is it that we maintain them and not end up with something? I'm going to prove to you that I'm not a career politician by talking about another neighborhood. As I look at the Sugar House neighborhood and the condensity and what happened there with traffic, that's probably not the way we want to go. And as we look at form zoning to where we would zone to maintain the fabric of the neighborhood is how we have to look at this, in my view. I love 9th and 9th, and it definitely changed. There's retail, but that is having a walkable, livable city, but it maintained its character. It maintained what it looked like. And those are the kinds of neighborhoods that we should model and not let change by doing our zoning, forming it around what is existing and growing it from there.
Thank you. Ms. Mendenhall, you are next.
This is my home neighborhood we're talking about, and the answer to how to preserve that character as we grow is right here. It's by knowing and talking to the community, the property owners, the residents, day in and day out. It's holding this dialogue. And I'll tell you, when Mutual Beauties happened, you know what I'm talking about. It was Missy Grice and Jason Stevenson and Daryl High and Michael Cohn and Ali Saba and the owners and the residents of 9th and 9th who called me up, because everybody's got my number. And I worked fast and hard to get one of the few moratoriums the city's passed in a very long time put in place, because we were seeing something happen, a blowout of a zone and some opportunities that we'd never seen happen before. And it threatened the character and the scale and the consistency of the 9th and 9th neighborhood. And it's not as easy to just say we need to just zone it like it is. There's 5 zones in 9th and 9th in the business district alone. And in talking with the community, they like that eclecticness. We like it like that. And so it isn't a simple zoning answer. It's about having an ongoing dialogue. And when the 9 line's coming through and suddenly parking's going to disappear, that dialogue continues and we keep at it together. Together. That's how we do this. It's not a simple zoning answer. It's not a money here. It's you got to have my number and you keep calling and we work together.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberger, you're next.
Thank you. Objective number 1, I would have a neighborhood recycling fairs in all the neighborhoods on a rotating basis. We used to have the curbside dump micro dumps. I don't like that. I want to have a recycling fair. It would have music and education. This would be great. And also in all the neighborhoods, I'd like to have more micro or bigger than micro police precincts. I want to bring the police back to the neighborhood. This is really, really important. Also, each neighborhood is very different in Salt Lake City, so I'd like to have selected fun activities dedicated for each neighborhood, but I can't say that because I don't know what's good for one neighborhood might not be. So the people in the neighborhood would say, we'd like this to happen. They would tell me, we want this to happen, and we'll make it happen. Because each neighborhood is different, and what would happen, let's say, on the East Bench might be different than in Rose Park. And there are a number of neighborhoods and also micro neighborhoods within the neighborhood, and we have to appreciate the differences. And the microhoods could be kind of hangouts. People like to go there. It could be a store or something. But it becomes an individual hood, so to speak. And I think we have to appreciate the identity of these neighborhoods and the microhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Escamilla, you're next.
So the key, I think, in this question is, again, how do we listen and become more inclusive of all the residents in this process? Every community is different. I think people embrace the opportunity to live in communities because they like them. it's becoming very difficult to live in Salt Lake City. And I don't know that we want to become the city that is only for individuals with income brackets of $500,000 and up. Gentrification is real, so it will require an angle of sustainability as we keep on moving excuse me, on this planning process, and it requires having not only the community councils, but other members and residents, other groups. There's a lot of active groups within Salt Lake City that want to protect the authenticity, the community that they represent, a lot of the culture within that, and I think as the mayor, you have to listen to that, listen to the council members that represent those areas, because obviously there's that connection, and bringing our city hall to those neighborhoods in order to listen and be more responsive. The reality is not going to be a one solution for every area. Some have also some preservation pieces that we need to protect, and they're part of the culture of Salt Lake City and, you know, the fabric of who we are as a city. But we need to recognize that we're growing, and a lot of it is infertility rate, and many people want their children that are not graduating from college to live in Salt Lake City, and should that be permissive only for people that can only afford that? I think we need to find solutions throughout affordable housing to address that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Penfold, you're next.
Actually, 35 years ago, neighborhood housing services started in East Liberty Park because of the high number of boarded up and abandoned old homes in that neighborhood. And today it suffers from a popularity crisis. I think that the thing that happened 30 years ago was that the neighborhood got organized. They started a nonprofit. They actually started doing really creative housing programs. They helped people reinvest in the neighborhood. They helped people move in. They diversified the income level of the people who were exiting the neighborhood and brought them back. And they then went to the city, and the city invested in 9th and 9th. And I think that is missing in the equation as we talk about how does that happen going forward. 9th and 9th is popular because it's been successful, and it will be challenging for that neighborhood to keep it at the scale that they want to keep it, but it's possible. What we need to be doing is reinforcing models like 9th and 9th all over the city. People shouldn't have to travel to 9th and 9th from across the city to experience something like 9th and 9th. They should be able to experience that at 8th and 8th on the west side, in parts of Rose Park, on North Temple, at Central 9. The city investing in those local communities is what makes those communities successful long term.
Thank you. Mr. Garbett, you're next.
So, like Luz, I worry about this tension that we have as we do in our neighborhoods, as we struggle with zoning and as we struggle with growth and changes. I love my neighborhood, I love its character, but I also know that our city is facing a severe housing crisis. And if we don't add more housing to the city, we will continue to price people out of our neighborhoods. I had this happen to me in the avenues. When I was working as an attorney with a nonprofit, I couldn't afford rent. We have to be more flexible in how we address that. Now, I think the way that we've done it in the city is we've resisted in many neighborhoods, and we've resisted, and then all of a sudden we'll have a break and it becomes overwhelming for a neighborhood. David brought that up about downtown Sugar House. What I'd like to see is that we take two policies in particular. One is one that's happening in the 9th and 9th area that the city's been experimenting with, form-based code, where rather than saying we care and we think we should have a say on what happens inside of your walls, instead we turn that over to code and we allow growth to happen regardless of what will happen inside those walls. And then the other is we need code that bakes in a level of growth, but at a pace that neighborhoods can absorb, so that we're adding townhomes on a small scale in our neighborhoods throughout the city.
Thank you. For the next question, Mr. Ibarra, you will speak first. Please keep that in mind as I read the following question. The following question comes from the Liberty Wells Community Council. Part of helping Salt Lake become a more livable city includes helping residents feel safe. What is your plan to address the rising property and nuisance crimes in residential neighborhoods located south and east of downtown?
a lot of our issues are connected to each other. It's interesting as we look at our homeless issue and we look at the percent that are shelter resistant, they need a compassionate assistance. And why do I bring that up? Is because that is one of the reasons that law enforcement is unable to answer 911 is the amount of time they're dealing with a smaller group of folks. We got to figure it out. There are some solutions that I've seen in other cities, but it's not time for that today. The question is, how is it that we make our neighborhood safe? This is near and dear to me because I walk this city 45 minutes every night. And what I've seen is alarming. It's not safe. We need to get police officers out on a beat, like in the 50s, where they walk an area, know the neighbors, know everybody that belongs somewhere. If something doesn't look right, to question. But that is to protect and serve. To serve, to be a part of the community, to know our children, to know the shop owners. That's where we need to go, and we need to do it quickly.
Thank you. Ms. Mendenhall, you're next.
Yeah, we've been working on this issue, particularly since Operation Rio Grande that was mentioned earlier. I've worked with the Community Council of Liberty Wells, Ballpark, ELPCO, and Central City as they put together a citizen survey, and almost 500 people, residents around the Liberty Park area, took a survey to talk about what do we want to do to address safety and the quality of experience at Liberty Park that all of our neighborhoods really treasure as our regional park of the downtown area. And the answer was loud and clear from the survey. It's pilot a park ranger program. And they worked with the city administration to try to get some funding to make such a proposal. This was 2 years ago, and it didn't happen. It did not come from the mayor's administration. And this year, I'm grateful that the administration proposed, although through the police department and not the parks department, a new pilot park ranger program. And we've had a good debate at a city level and in a community level about what do we want park rangers to look like. We got to keep this conversation going. But I'm happy to tell you that we've just funded 6 new park ranger pilot program to expand our bike squad and get more bike squad presence in the neighborhoods. It's also about the proximity between the neighborhoods and City Hall. And that's why I've worked hard to organize walk-alongs on 2nd East, south of the Ballpark area. When there's an issue that rises up and we need to come together and see it and feel it and walk it together, that's what City Hall needs to be able to do for you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberger, you're next.
Thank you very much. Again, I would encourage the establishment of more precincts. Micro precincts, 1 or 2 law enforcement officers to a larger precinct, depending on the amount of crime that's reported. Some communities need more, some need less, but I want to show the police. I want to make the communities blue. I want to wave that blue flag. I want to declare the gangbangers, the kid gangsters, as domestic terrorists. These kids are very dangerous with a submachine gun, and they don't care. And these assholes have to be dealt with. And seriously. And one of the things is to interdict why these kids become gangs, maybe as early as preschool, and work with the recruiters of these gangs to recruit them in a positive way. It's a big re-education campaign for these folks. And this is very, very important because the enemy can be some of the kids next door. And, you know, it's not ISIS here. And it's not others. It's the kids next door who are. It's not the Chinese or the Russians here. It's the kids next door. Some of them, and they're very, very dangerous with the weapons they have, and their intelligence, their allegiance is either to the color red or blue or to a name. This has to stop, and it will stop under my administration.
Thank you. We will hear a rebuttal from Mr. Ibarra, and following that, a response from Ms. Escobar.
Wow. I've got to say is that we're all part of the same community. And the day that I see us want to categorize our kids, our teenagers into, I came from a neighborhood that I had to be taught from my dad that when I got pulled over, there was a drill. And don't take your hands off the wheel. Don't talk loud. Be polite. Yes, sir. No, sir. That's not us. And that targeting our kids is not us. I wasn't going to say anything, but we're Salt Lake City, and we've got some improvement to do, and targeting our kids is not one of them.
Thank you. Ms. Escamilla.
Thank you. I'm going to answer the question, and I'll rebuttal to answer that other issue. So I think in terms of our law enforcement, public safety is the #1 priority for the mayor, for the city. If we don't feel safe, there's a problem and the city's failing. It's very basic core responsibility. So what we have is we do welcome about 100,000 people every day. And our entire system and infrastructure has to welcome all these people. We are the capital city, and a lot of employment and a lot of things happen here. So we need to be proactive, especially with our law enforcement, and actually get some resources to our law enforcement beyond our taxpayers and what we currently have in our revenue. It will require working with the state. And I know people say, well, we can't wait for the state. Well, no, you don't have to wait. You just have to go and demand it, because we are the capital city. And we need to stop this war with the state. Enough. It's not helping us. It hasn't helped us. That's why I'm tired. I've been living here for 20 years. I live in Rose Park. I have 6 children. I'm done. This is serious. So if people don't feel safe, we have a problem. Community policing is critical. We need more police officers. So one of the things I want to do is make sure that we address the chronic homelessness population, which is about 10%. Those are ones that need to be triaged through some wraparound services, but then moving to real police officers. Now, because of our traffic and how crowded our city is now, we need another precinct, and that needs to happen on the east side, on 20th and 20th, and there's been conversations on that. Can I use my rebuttal? Thank you. I want to finish this because it's important. Resources are important. We have a chief that actually cares about community policing, that cares about valuing the diversity of our city, about seeing people as human beings, and we need to be a city that respects that and understand that there's a school to prison pipeline in our city, and it usually impacts communities of color and low-income kids. And at the end of the day, that affects everyone in the city. I will be a mayor that will be addressing that on day 1, that we need more training that is really about bias. So we have police officers that are doing the job, but they are getting the tools they need to be effective. We cannot have this type of language that we just heard about children. Our children, these are our kids. Our education needs to address that as well. And we need a mayor that makes the school board and the superintendent accountable for quality of education. I understand they have their own governing piece and you guys elect them in the school board, but we need someone to make them accountable, because you need a mayor that's a leader and will stand up for your children and my children as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, but we are going to hear a rebuttal from Ms. Mendenhall, and following that, a response from Mr. Penfold.
Thank you. I just want to address a few things that have come up that I'm happy to actually be able to report on, which is in this dialogue that we've been going through as a community and your City Hall representatives, we have heard you loud and clear that you want to feel more safe with the police officers we have, and you want to have more of that neighborhood patrol beat officer presence. So what we've done at City Hall is just completed the funding to hire 50 new officers that are patrol-focused officers, and this will allow our Salt Lake City Police Department to fully staff beat patrols everywhere in Salt Lake City. This means you're going to be able to get to know the officers who are patrolling your neighborhood, and they're going to get to know the needs in your area. This is what real action looks like. This isn't a resolution in the state. This is real action in Salt Lake City that happened through a dialogue between us. And I'm grateful for the dialogue. We got to keep it going, but I'm out of time.
Thank you. Mr. Penfold, you're next.
And the initiative to fund those officers started my last term as chair of the city council when we funded those positions just before my departure from the city council in 2017. I'm glad to see it's continuing. One of the challenges we will always face as the capital city is that we already have the highest per capita number of officers than any other community in this state. We see our population double almost every day. Half of the calls during the day are actually for people who are not residents of the city, for accidents and other crime activities. And community policing is one of those opportunities that will really help us feel safer in our neighborhoods. We need the officers to be very familiar with the people in the neighborhood, but we also need them working with the people in the neighborhood. Having the opportunity to get out there and train neighbors on what to look for, to have meetings so they can get to know their neighbors, to know what's working in the community, to know when something's off, and to have a direct connection to an officer they can talk to is really going to make a significant change in how we feel safe in our neighborhoods today. I also just want to mention Park Rangers. That's a project that Rick Graham and I talked about 10 years ago when we were doing Parleys, and I'm so thrilled to see it happening.
Thank you. Mr. Garbett, you're next.
So on the policing front, I think, one, the city needs to abandon its informal policy of containment. By that I mean saying that crime will happen, let's put it into specific areas. I think we're watching that happen right now on Library Square. These activities cannot be contained. They seep out. We have to go after them anywhere there are. We need to add those beat cops to our city. Another thing on the funding front, the city really missed the boat 2 years ago. The legislature realized that having a homeless resource center puts strain on communities. And there are a lot of cities in the state, most cities, that don't do their fair share to address homelessness. The legislature put together a funding scheme for every city but Salt Lake. And we let that opportunity go by without also requesting that funding. There's no reason we shouldn't have received that as well. In the long run, to make significant improvement on safety, though, I think that our money is best spent on two things. One, education. I don't think that the city should simply turn that job over to the school board. We have to participate in education. This addresses a host of issues. We know this is money well spent. And then the second is our investment in communities. As we make communities more lively, as we bring people to our communities, as we develop those coffee shops, as we get people onto the street, this is what brings safety. We can't always expect our police officers to be the only ones working on that front. We have to be part of the solution.
Thank you. Mr. Dobkin, you're next.
Thank you. One of the things that has been jolting to me as I've been running pretty much full-time since January is being in the neighborhoods, whether they're leafy east side or in the central part of the city or on the west side, and hearing people talk about crime and the fact that they don't feel safe and the amount of time it takes for the police officers to get there. I'm glad to see that the sales tax went up and that we're going to hire 50 new officers. But there's a broader issue here. I don't think we know if that's enough officers or not. I think we need to see what happens. But I know this, that it's a difficult job now to be a police officer. It's particularly tough across the country and in our city. And we're not doing enough to attract people to a life in law enforcement. We're not doing enough as a neighborhood and as a community to let our officers know that we appreciate them. We start officers at $21.50 an hour. The classes, the amount of officers that are attracted for training purposes. We used to get 500 for new enrollments. We're down now to much, much less. It's partly our job to let our policemen and firemen know that they are appreciated.
I'm sorry, that's time. Thank you. For the next question, Erin Mendenhall, you will speak first. Please keep that in mind as I read the question out. This question comes from the Sugar House Community Council. Residents have expressed concern that affordable housing efforts aren't reflected in the new projects in Sugar House? How would you propose to partner with developers to ensure residents aren't priced out of rentals/ownership in their own neighborhoods?
Great question, and Sugar House is a perfect example. As we just wrapped up our project area reinvestment there last year or so, 27 years of reinvestment to create the Sugar House we know today. And when it started, and even as it was iterated upon over the years, it was really, again, about a conversation with the community. What do you need? What do you want? Where do you want to see this thing go? And that's how project area plans are created. So to expand that to a citywide level, the redevelopment agency is one of the greatest tools that the city has to ensure that the development that happens includes things that we want to have happen. And we do that through buying up property and then selling it at a discounted rate in order to get some of those benefits, offering discounted loans in order to get those benefits, and several other financial tools. I want to see a mayor in Salt Lake City that really knows these conversations with the development community and can leverage our precious tax dollars to get more affordable housing across the city. Again, not concentrated just on the west side of the city, and that can bring us the spectrum, really, of different housing types. We know that we need all different types of affordable housing. A family of 5 needs affordable housing. Someone coming out of incarceration needs affordable housing. My mom, on her fixed income, needs affordable housing. I have needed affordable housing from time to time as I've lived my life in this city. We need a mayor who knows not only the experience of living in this city at different times, but knows how to use the tools to get more out of the development that happens.
Thank you. Mr. Goldberger, you are next.
Thank you. I want to see housing, housing banks, number one. I want to have better vetting of landlords. I want to have better vetting of tenants. I want to use vouchers. I want to have incentives with landlords, the private sector, the mayor's office, and the private sector to establish what is appropriate housing. Affordable depends on people's income. It's important to have quality housing, though, with quality tenants. And there's a lot of housing out here. Some is substandard, and it's an eyesore. I don't want that. In other words, if people want to work with the city, we will be happy to work with them, but they're going to be very nice standards, realistic standards in how to make this work. Again, working with the private sector, I'm not so much a fan of public housing. I like to work with the private sector, but I want to have very nice quality housing. But it's a partnership between the landlords and the city. I thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Camilla, you're next.
Thank you. So mentioning Sugar House, and we've heard that conversation that even with all the density that's happening in Sugar House is not being responsive in terms of affordability. So I think it's even how we define affordability. There is, I think, the opportunity to utilize the tools in the toolbox, RDA being one, but also the stick and carrot that we're using with those developers. And yeah, negotiating with developers is not easy. And I've done that as part of the Science Bank team. I've been working in banking for 13 years, working with developers. We have developers in our table too, so that's great. You know, you have a little bit of everything. But if you're gonna start working and making sure that we have X number of units, the best practice across the country is 10%. Not everyone in Salt Lake City is doing 10%. So what are we doing to make sure that's being enforced as we move forward with incentives? And also defining affordability and working with all the different organizations. So the mayor has a role in different organizations within the city and the municipality. Some of them are independent nonprofits, others are part of the city, and they have to work with the city council, and all of that collaboration needs to happen with a bridge builder. And I'm ready to do that on day one, and I want to make sure that it's responsive across the city, not only affordable housing on one side of the city and leaving everything on the other side without affordable housing. It has to be across the city, making sure that we're addressing the different communities that need affordable housing and making sure that we are moving with those individuals as they're getting maybe that extra $1 an hour that could probably take them out of some services. We need to make sure we're responsive to that.
Thank you. Mr. Penfold, you're next.
Affordability is a crisis for all of us. If you're a young professional or a young couple and you're wanting to find your first home, your first-time home, you will not find anything in the market in Salt Lake City. You will not find anything available. And if you happen to find the house that grandma just left to go to the nursing home that's still affordable, you probably still can't afford the mortgage in that neighborhood. This is creating a crisis for all of us in that we are pricing ourselves out of our housing market. If I were to sell my home today, I could not buy a home in the city. I could not live in the city. I could not qualify for the mortgage, even with the equity in my home. We need about 10,000 units. I have a plan for 10,000 affordable units across a wide spectrum by 2025. The City Council has actually done a pretty good job of allocating money for affordable housing. The current administration has failed at talking to developers, implementing affordable housing across the spectrum, making sure that we have housing available for people who are ready to move out of homelessness, and making sure we have housing available for young professionals who want their first home. It is my commitment to those 10,000 doors across the spectrum. We need to make sure our city stays diverse with income levels through affordable housing.
Thank you. Mr. Garbett, you're next.
Luce, you're too kind. I wish I could describe my career as a developer. You may have heard my name, Garbett, through Garbett Homes. My father has a construction company that builds homes. I grew up working with him. I used to sweep floors there. I worked as a finish carpenter for him. I was a real estate agent. I'm very proud of the work they do. They built the first production net zero home in our climate region. They are the third largest builder nationally of net zero energy ready homes. I think they do incredible work. He deserves the credit for that, not me. This is the type of housing that I think we need in Salt Lake. Look, I've lived in all of the most expensive markets in the United States. Recently, I was living in the Bay Area. Over a 10-year period, Bay Area in California added 600,000 jobs. In that same period, 60,000 housing units. They have a great rent control program. Who thinks they could afford to buy housing there, though? I have a four-part plan about how the city can address housing. One, on the deeply affordable level that requires subsidies. I do think the city actually has a good plan. It's about not fighting. And right now, the city council and the mayor are fighting over where that money should go. In terms of how do we get young families, how do we get our empty nesters here in the city? Again, this is about that flexibility in the way that our neighborhoods grow and develop so that we can add that sort of product here.
Thank you. Mr. Dobkin, you're next.
Thank you. You know, I have a little saying on my desk. It says, it's from Ronald Reagan. It says, there's nothing you can't accomplish if you don't care about who gets the credit. And I believe that the city and the city council have been too proprietary. You know, we're the few, we're the proud, we're the liberals. We need to get through that. We're not going to solve affordable housing without a village. And yeah, we took some of that sales tax and we've thrown it in for a few $1 million. At current rates, that's about 220 units a year. We're 10,000 short. That's not going to get us there. We need to sit down with the next governor. We need to explain it's not just Salt Lake City, it's the whole state. We need to grab a couple of $1 billion from the projected bonding for roads and use that for affordable housing and leverage it out. And you know what? I don't care if that's Governor Spencer Cox's idea or Governor Greg Hughes, God forbid, or Governor Thomas Wright's idea. We just need those units, and we need a city that isn't pounding its chest, but that is quietly working with other partners.
Thank you. Mr. Ibarra, you're next.
Thank you. You know, a lot of plans, a lot of policies, a lot of money dedicated to fixing the problem, and some of the money some folks won't even take. But I tell you, in this nation, not just our city, there's a 7 million unit gap. In the last 6 years, property values have gone up 47%. and wages 16. Folks that are living in homes and their property values are going up, do their property taxes slow up, or do they just grow too? There needs to be some caps put on that if you're living in an area, you've lived in there for 20 years, that it can't go up at the standard. When somebody gets to a fixed income, the property tax ought to be fixed as well. Some things need to stop. But the good part is wherever there's a huge gap like we're experiencing right now, a need appears and folks will come. Entrepreneurial, the tech sector is coming into affordable housing and they're going to disrupt the solution. We got modular homes. We've got some homes that I saw in South Carolina that were unbelievable, cargo container homes that were put together that were wonderfully and built at about 70%.
Thank you. That's time.
I'm out of time.
Thank you. For the next question, Mr. Goldberger, you will speak first. Please keep that in mind as I read the question. A lot of you mentioned the importance of increasing police presence in our communities in order to increase safety. How will your administration work to reduce police brutality that often comes with a higher presence of police officers in communities of color? Oh, I could repeat it. So I'll read it again. A lot of you mentioned the importance of increasing police presence in our communities in order to increase safety. How will your administration work to reduce police brutality that often comes with a higher police presence? That's the question.
Police brutality. Oh, police brutality.
Yes.
How do you reduce police brutality?
Oh, thank you. We've had 19 deaths by cop so far. And I think the question here is better vetting of police. We don't want Dirty Harry wannabes. That's not what we want. Dirty Harry was a pretty good cop, but Dirty Harry wannabes are dangerous, and we don't want those. And they've cost cities tens of millions of dollars. So we want to have very careful vetting, and I want to have better paid police. I would like to have the best paid police and best equipped and best trained in the state of Utah. That's my objective. But it's really important when it comes to vetting to have the best vetted police in the state. Because if we have some police maybe a little sociopathic or psychopathic, some are, we're doing with dangerous people. And under certain situations, they shoot first and think last. We can't have that because that's just bad policing. It's very dangerous, though, and I think through better training and better vetting, I think cops can determine when to shoot and when not to shoot. And if we need backup, we should get backup. Decisions made on the spot can be either very good or not so good, and we need to get, as I say, very carefully trained police. And I think this is of the utmost importance because one situation can cost the city tens and tens of millions of dollars if it goes wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Escamilla, you're next.
Thank you, and this is a very important issue, a personal issue, and I think David Ibarra made reference to this. Just how does it feel to be a woman of color and driving and having to be pulled over by a police officer? The conversations that are happening at my dinner table with my children when they're driving and it's late at night, I worry if there's going to be an interaction with law enforcement, and no one should be facing that situation. So we do have a great police force. They're committed. We have a chief that's committed. We need to make sure we do an assessment of the training on bias training, cultural competency, and the way we address the diversity within our city. We're the second most diverse city in the whole state. And we do refugee resettlement. We welcome people. We are welcoming, giving, compassionate community. And that requires a public law enforcement that reflects that community, and we're not there. So hiring, promotion, and retention of high qualified police officers is critical, and that should reflect our community. So we have to start to create community policing and building strong relationships between law enforcement and those communities when they're in grade school, not when they're in high school addressing other type of issues. So how do we create those relationships? The law enforcement needs to be in our communities. We need to embrace that. And make sure that our police officers are spending time in community beyond just policing, but also empowering communities to speak up and not to just label them that they cannot handle police officers, because that's a mistake that I think I take offense with the city council saying that the West Side and people of color don't want to have police officers in their
Thank you, that's
their
time.
uniforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan Penfield.
I was very pleased to be on the city council when we funded the first de-escalation training program with equipment and software for the police department. That needs to be expanded, and it needs to be a regularly provided service to all officers. We also need to incorporate cultural competency and cultural sensitivity training into our police force. That Luz referenced that, and that's critical because we need to have our officers understanding why communities in our city are afraid of the police and are afraid to interact. And they need to know how to take that into consideration in everything they do during the day. But most importantly, I think we need to work towards a police force that actually reflects the demographics of our city, and we're not even close to that. It's going to take some specific HR policy changes so that our public safety people look like the people who live in Salt Lake City. That goes for public safety, but it also goes through all departments in the city. We have not done a great assessment of that demographic comparison. We need to do that immediately, and we need to change our hiring practices so we are deliberately looking to reflect the people who we serve in this community.
Thank you. Mr. Garbett, you are next.
So I recognize coming to this issue, it's one that I need help with, because my experience with the police in the city, I know is not the experience of all of our residents. And that's unfortunate. We don't want that to be the case. In order to address that, I need to make this a broader conversation than just me and just my plans. Where I would like to start is to continue that dialogue between Utahns Against Police Brutality, Black Lives Matter, Chief Brown, and the mayor's office. We have to find one, up front, what are the policies that we will institute? What is the training we will institute to avoid many of these incidences that we've had? We have to do better on that front, preventing those from ever happening. And then two, we need a better system afterwards for dealing with those issues. Frankly, as a lawyer, looking at the standard by which we evaluate police officers for criminality, I don't see that ever being a way that we're going to see serious change. The city has to be willing to consider its own civil penalties for action. Just like Stan said, I want the city to be proactive about this. I think we have to go out and identify talent. We have to go out and recruit people to come be part of our force so that we can be more reflective of the communities that we serve. And finally, we ask too much of our police officers. You know, many times we're asking them to be first responders. We're asking them to be social workers. We need others to help them shoulder that burden. We need to see more diversity in terms of roles on the police force.
Thank you. Mr. Dobkin, you're next.
With regard to the police force, I'm a pretty straight shooter, so to speak. I believe that every police officer, when they leave the house in the morning and they kiss their spouse and their kids, has a right to believe they're going to come home. I also believe that a mayor ought never to politicize the police department or a shooting or a police incident. I think the facts ought to be looked at. I think there should be great integrity, and the decisions ought to be made in a very professional way, whether that happens to be the most popular decision at the moment or not. We owe that to our police officers. We owe it to the public. And where we get into trouble is where mayors or elected officials somehow they have an allegiance to this group or that group. We need to be, as a mayor, I believe, right down the middle. We need it by the book, and we need to stand by officers who are accused falsely, and we need not to hold back to those who deserve to have their actions seriously looked at.
Thank you. Mr. Ibarra, you're next.
Well, my first big goal as a youngster was to be a police officer, a Sacramento City police officer. I took criminology, I took the test, I passed. I took the physical, I passed. I took the psychological interviews, and I passed, and I got my call to be a police officer. Unfortunately, I was doing something else at the time with Marriott Corporation, so I passed, but that was a goal. As a youngster, I got the other end of it. From the neighborhood that I was raised in, yeah, I had encounters, and I'll tell you something, some of them I deserved, because we were knuckleheads. But we can have a city that has both protect and serve and respected for the occupation that they have, and we can have a citizenry that also gets and protects and looks at an officer for help. Now, we need to have a civil review board. We need to have it with subpoena power, and we need to make sure that cam recorders become the norm and that they're accessible as quickly as needed, and that becomes the new police report, that we don't have them that are in paper. When you have them in paper, they don't match what is in data. And then we need to study the data to ensure that we're doing a good job.
Thank you. Ms. Mendenhall, you're next.
Thank you. Of all the questions so far tonight, I think this one, except for this first speaker at the table, was full of a lot of truth, and there's a lot of good said by my peers at the table tonight. So I don't want to repeat a lot of the good things that were said, and I think part of the ability we have to come at this with 6 different voices and have a lot of truth spoken is because this is a complex issue, and everyone's relationship with it is a little bit different. And whether or not you've ever had a negative encounter with a police officer, I don't know. But I know what my experiences are, and I know what the community's experiences are, because we've been in that dialogue going through this together, and it is complex. Our police officers are, especially in Salt Lake City, challenged more than any other police department in the state of Utah. When you think about what our police officers have to deal with, what they want to come to work to do, really. We've got a tough job here in Salt Lake City. And I'll say, on the one hand, we need to be paying our officers top dollar. Our officers have the hardest job of any police officer in the state, and they've got a lot to come to work for. On the other hand, our community doesn't feel as safe as it does as it should across the board. That's why last month I helped to fund new body cameras that will be on every officer in the field and that will start recording earlier. Transparency is part of public safety. It's part of the communication we need to build as a community. And I'm out of time.
Thank you. We will now commence with the third part of the debate, where each candidate will have 2 minutes to give their closing remarks. We will start with Ms. Mendenhall.
Thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. This is where it happens at the community council level. This is where the changes in the community, our most important dialogue happens. And this is where, when we know something's going wrong, it comes from our relationships we have here. So thank you for being so invested in the future of this city that you took a couple hours to come down here, meet us, and listen to us talk tonight. Please keep invested in this city. You are our future community council, city council leaders, and maybe our next mayors, and hopefully not in this round, but our next mayor in the next round may be out there in the audience tonight. We live in Salt Lake City on purpose because this community we have going on is totally unique, not just politically speaking. I don't live in Lehigh or Harriman or Saratoga Springs or Bountiful because this is the kind of community I want to live in. I see a bright and optimistic future for Salt Lake City. We have serious issues at our table. We have for a long time. I know how to make city government work for us because I know how to work with you. My background's in air quality, my foreground's in air quality. It's the lens through which I see all of the issues we talked about tonight and many others that we didn't get to. but it's really about making this place a better place for us to live, work, play, breathe, raise kids, and stay. And that is a real challenge that I'm ready to take on and grow as your next mayor. I've had a blast doing it as your neighbor and your community council friend and your city councilwoman. And we need a mayor who really knows how city government works. That's what I'm here to bring you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Ibarra, you're next.
I want to be your next mayor, but let me talk about something that I've never dreamed that I would experience. How much fun I've had since January 15th when I resigned as CEO and president of 4 of my companies to run for mayor. We've knocked on 59,000 doors, had 14,000 conversations, 1,400 myself, been to the city councils, and oh boy, they're not always fun. There's a lot of energy going on. And when I went to the 9th and 9th, I almost said to poor Tom, I believe was his name, you better pause and go back to your boss and say, you better bring in some reinforcements here because it sounds like somebody's not listening. We could do a better job of listening to each other. But I tell you what, I am delighted that I didn't start building a platform until after I talked to so many folks. But as a lifelong progressive, receiving an appointment from President Clinton to serve on the Air Force Academy with General Scowcroft and others, receiving 3 appointments from 3 different governors, being the advisor to 2 mayors, Anderson and Becker, and being on the airport board for 8 years. I understand government. And also being a performance coach for over 300 companies and CEOs all across this nation. I believe I bring a unique set of skills and talent, that it's different. Boy, I don't like talk, but I do love walk. And we need to change and get something done because I'm not running for me. I'm running for you. And I want to serve you. I hope you'll consider voting for me on the 13th.
Thank you. Mr. Dobkin, you're next.
8 years ago, I told my husband, that's it. You're going to have to earn the money. I'm going full-time into public service, and that's what I've done. And it has been the honor of my lifetime to have you, the people of Salt Lake, allow me to represent you. Governor Leavitt, I knocked on his door. He said, you know, it's the toughest job in sports being the mayor of Salt Lake. He said, because if you're doing your job, you're standing up and you're representing the voice of the people, and it's not the voice of much of the rest of the state on Medicaid expansion or on medical cannabis or on education funding or on air pollution. You're just different. He said, so you need to speak for your people so they don't feel voiceless, so they don't feel like no one in government is standing up and speaking their speech. But on the other hand, you can't get anything done if you alienate those that you have to work with to get things done. And I believe over these last 8 years in being in so many of your living rooms, I've learned how to represent you, but I also learned through 8 years, 6 years in the Senate and other years in serving the Democratic Party, how to get things done like the homos and the momos, getting them together with a non-discrimination. My name is not on that bill. It's nowhere. It's all Republican, signed by a Republican governor. That's what it took to get it done. And that's what I'll do with your mayor. Hopefully a lot of things will happen and you won't know where they came from.
That's time. David Garbett, you're next.
This has been fun to discuss the nitty-gritty of the city. I think we've missed the biggest issue of all, though. In Salt Lake City, we have terrible air quality, and that's why I'm running. And the reason that I'm running is to offer a difference from the path that we've been on. And I don't think that that path is in this debate today. I think the path that's being offered in Salt Lake City comes from the Division of Air Quality. They are the leader in how we address air quality. The governor takes cues from them. The legislature takes cues from them. And let me tell you what their approach is. They say, we'll just hope that the federal government will continue to ratchet down standards for cars. That's 75% of our effort to clean up the air. The other part is that we'll expect that they'll develop new appliances so that our homes will have more efficient furnaces. Now for polluted industry, the one that we actually regulate, we are going to let them pollute more. That's their approach. We are going to let them pollute more. Did you know that the refineries in Salt Lake City, until the Division of Air Quality was sued in 2015, did not have operating permits? This is how air quality is done in the state. That's who I'm running against. I want to provide an alternative path where we control our destiny. We take the reins. And we say no longer will we wait for the federal government to solve this problem for us. No longer will we wait for a governor to solve this problem. I put together a 4-part plan about what we can do. The most important part of that plan, though, is that Salt Lake City becomes the leader for an alternative vision about how we get to clean air in our airshed. We can do this. I know that we can. I'm optimistic about it, but we can't leave that to someone else. We have to solve this problem. We can't wait for anyone else. My career, I worked for 10 years as an attorney with the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, litigating on this issue, getting into the nitty-gritty, and I look forward to working on it as your next mayor.
Mr. Penfold, you're next.
I come from the neighborhoods, and I was trained in the neighborhoods. And our neighborhoods make Salt Lake City great. We love our unique neighborhoods. And I propose to you that it's time we take Salt Lake City back to the neighborhoods. It's where the power lies for us to truly make the incredible changes that we've all talked about here this evening on this panel. It's going to require all of us working really hard and working together, and it starts in your neighborhood. I served on the city council because I wanted to represent my neighborhood. And I learned in that process how absolutely powerful community voices are in the city. Our administration has not been listening to the people in the city. It has not been delivering on what you're asking for from a city administration. Everything from affordable housing to our road infrastructure to our air quality. You need a mayor who is responsive to the concerns that you are truly, literally screaming about and are going unheard. I promise you a place at the table, and most importantly, I promise you a voice at the table. Being mayor is a city job, and I think being mayor belongs a little bit to somebody who's a city nerd, and I am totally a city nerd. And my commitment to you, should you choose me to be mayor, is to continue to talk to you in the nerdiest way possible.
Thank you. Ms. Escamilla, you're next.
I love Salt Lake City, and I love my 6 children, and that's why I'm running for Salt Lake City mayor. Because I have a 3-year-old that I have to give her medication for her asthma every day, and it's been like that for the last 2 years. Of course, it's personal, and as you can see, I have asthma too, so it's getting more difficult. And I don't want to leave Salt Lake City. So for the last 11 years, I've been a champion for all of you, because I've been representing Salt Lake City in the legislature. And I have passed 50 bills working with our Republican legislature. Now, the more I listen on the issues, the more we go into the details of budgeting. And by the way, I have a master's in public administration. I have a business degree. I work in business. I work in state government as well. Government is the same in terms of how you do and how you run a budget. But what's important is we're not going to do it alone. There is no way in terms of infrastructure as a capital city, in terms of air quality and addressing whether there is an enforcement issue or we need to move refineries, you're not going to do it alone. We cannot fight anymore with the state. We're losing. And I'm here to tell you that you need a champion, and I'm that champion. I'm committed to working with everyone, whether it's the city council, community councils. I've been working with them for the last 11 years in my area. And your voices will be heard because that's important. We need a city that's responsive, that has a way of navigating, that is a city hall that makes sense because I feel comfortable going there, because I know that if neighborhood is coming too, they need to come to my neighborhood as well, that we can have the issues addressing our refugee community and our immigrant community, being responsive to that. I ask you to look into experience, into results, into the reputation of individuals so you can have an effective mayor in this next election, and I hope you can vote for Luz Escamilla. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Goldberger, you're next.
Thank you. Folks, here's a very neat idea for a cleaner Salt Lake City. I propose a 10-cent redemption on used cigarette butts that would be collected by the Buttmobile. If you have 30,000 butts that go into a drain and blow a valve, you may cause $1 million worth of damage. A cigarette butt is a hazardous waste. And guess what, Big Tobacco? There's going to be a fantastic surprise for you legally. I'm a common sense-crat. I have an incredible vision for the city that's very different. I'm a public servant, period. I don't like politics. I don't like politicians. I believe in government by objectives, which is to do the job government should do and do it well. I work, again, for the people, period. A reality check. In this race, I'm a sub underdog, way down. And I'll tell you, I have raised on my GoFundMe page a big $5 so far. So I ask you, anything you can give, anything, money, non-money, that's a value, I'll take it. And I want to thank you for your support, and hopefully you'll consider me for your next mayor with your vote. Thank you.
We will hear from a rebuttal from Ms. Mendenhall.
I just got to use up my last 60 seconds, and I won't take all of it. You know, we've heard some alternative versions, alternative visions, alternative universes tonight. We've heard about how the state's going to come to our rescue. I have been a Salt Lake City resident for 22 years. We have had a former state legislator as our mayor the last 12 years almost. The state is not coming to our rescue. No matter where you're coming from, we're doing this, people. We have to lead out. And maybe if we have a mayor that doesn't walk up there and punch them in the face every time they have the chance to talk to him, maybe they'll help us out, maybe. But this cavalry is not coming. It's been 12 years, people, 2 administrations. We need somebody who knows how to work with the community in Salt Lake City and lead Salt Lake City. Whether they're coming with us or they're not, we got to do this on our own. That's why we're here tonight, and hopefully you can see, as much as we all have a lot in common, there's a lot of differences too. I knew you'd all take the rebuttal.
They do have some, so yes, we will give you additional rebuttals for the conclusion. Yes, yes, if Mr. Ibarra.
I agree with what mostly Aaron said, but we're not going to do this on our own. But I'll tell you this, we never, ever will get to an agreement by insulting the other party. It just doesn't happen. We're the front room to the House of Utah. The state needs us. We need them. The county needs us. We need them. And it's time we grow up and act like adults and get something done for you. The arguing and leadership misbehavior is just absolutely ridiculous. And that's why I want to run. I just like to get something done.
Mr. Dobakis.
The cavalry arrived, and the Rio Grande, and they put $100 million in there. And I don't know where Salt Lake City ever would have come up with that. And I see highway patrol officers there. I think this idea that somehow the city can, with its 203,000 people, can get along just fine, thank you, on its own, I don't think so. I think we need a village, and I think we need somebody that can stand up for our principles as well as put their arm around whoever it is, and maybe they're holding their nose, but be saying, come on, Greg, I need your help on this.
Don't call me Greg. We're not supposed to get nasty.
Thank you. And that concludes the debate for the night.
I've got one more.
Oh.
I'll take my minute,
Oh, one more minute.
just for fun. I want to go back to this air quality theme. I think that we can make a difference. And this is why I got into this race a long time ago. It's why I made the decision to run against the sitting mayor. I didn't wait for her to get out because this was so important to me. And it's that sort of leadership that we need. We do have to work with the state. I totally agree. I've done that. The Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance had to work with people who are on the opposite side of me. I know we can make a difference on this. I know that we can lead on air quality. You know, one of the critical issues we have is the inland port. And I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite endorsements of this campaign. Last week, one of my organizers knocked on the door of Derek Miller, the head of the Inland Port Board Authority, and said, I'm here with David Garbett. And Derek said, I don't like David. He's against the inland port. And my organizer said, well, they're all against the inland port. And he said, no, but David's really against it.
Please hold applause until the very end. We will hear from the last three candidates, to be fair.
Is that
Yes,
me? Okay,
you
sorry.
may go ahead.
I couldn't hear you. I apologize. So, you know, that now that we're all closing more remarks on this, I think it's, you know, it's critical to understand that we pay, taxpayers are paying to the state, and many of those services through our general fund have to come back to our city. So we still need to go back and make sure our education is being funded adequately. If people are feeling that issue in schools, I'm sure there's parents here that have kids in school district in Salt Lake, or grandparents. This is real, and we do need to work with them. And I'm telling you, the person more effective to do that is me, and I show that in my record. That's what I'm saying. Check on record, check on experience. And I don't know that we can afford to think that we're gonna go and be on our own in an isolated island. We don't live like that. And I'm very concerned that we're not utilizing all of our resources, that we need to go and say, we're the capital city. It's the vested interest of the entire state to see Salt Lake City succeed. It's really about a vision. It's really about having working relationships, and I'm ready to do that. And I hope we can get to that point where we can all work together. Thank you.
A couple words on the Port Authority, because I know you're interested in the Port Authority. I'm opposed to the Port Authority and its location. I want a wonderful park and a parkway, a nature conservatory. I want to bring the port to Wendover, Utah, a perfect place, lots of space, and a fantastic airport. Tooele County would love it. Great economic development, but not in the Northwest Corridor. Wrong place? No. I want to stop the litigation, and I want to have the Utah Export Expo by the airport to promote Utah products. This makes sense. I am a common sense cat. The Deseret News said I'm a common sense cat. I don't meow too well, but that's okay. That's okay. I believe in common sense. I believe in government by objectives. I'm laser specific, and again, I look forward to your consideration and your vote. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Penfold.
I didn't
If
have
you
a
would like.
rebuttal. But since I have a minute, no, I'm kidding.
They found the loophole, but that concludes the debate for the night. We would like to thank all of their candidates for their participation. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope you travel home safely, and most important, remember to vote this August.